Okay, so this is Susan Youngflesh on behalf of Chair for the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. We're here today for the special meeting, December 21st, 2021. The time is 5:33. And I would ask, is Pastor Spriggs present? I don't believe that he is. Ms. Husband, would you mind calling roll?
Okay.
Actually, yes, if you could do that, that would be great.
Okay. Board Chair Susan Youngflesh,
Present.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney, Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., Buki Domingos,
Here.
Nadia Keen Ayub, Bonnie Kink,
Here.
Marianne Pintar,
Present.
Tim Ware, G.I. Wilson.
Here.
That concludes the roll, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Husband. Moving on to the agenda item number 2. We have 2 items on the agenda today. But first and foremost is the continuance of teleconferencing meeting options pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. So underneath, as we previously discussed, underneath the current orders due to teleconferencing and remote work because of COVID-19, we have to have a motion to continue to teleconference for the next regular board meeting if the board members would like to continue having this virtual platform available for a board meeting. I believe we have a new date set, do we, Mr. Parker?
Yes, it'll be January 11th.
So do I hear a motion to continue to teleconference from any of the?
Chair Youngflesh, if I can just put on the record the findings that CLERB would need to make to allow for continuing. So it'd be a motion to find that CLERB has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that state and local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing. So those are the findings that need to be made in order to continue teleconferencing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hoffman. So based off of what council has suggested, does anyone have a motion incorporating that language? Thank you, GI. And I'm also working on a smaller platform. So if you could verbalize anything, if any other board member could speak up. Is there a second?
Second, Bonnie.
Ms. King, thank you. And Ms. Husband, can you call roll for the motion?
Board Chair Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney. Just because I can't see right off the top if they're here, Board Chair, I'm just going to call their name.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub, Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware, and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
I apologize for the delay, Board Chair Youngflesh. It looks like there's a couple of people that wish to speak. Give me 1 second, ma'am.
And Ms. Hoffman, I just want to clarify that public comment is okay. I know that's not noticed on the special meeting agenda.
Yeah, public comment has to be provided for the agendized items, but there is no general public comment tonight.
Okay.
Okay. The first one is Lori Sadania.
Okay. And
Thank you. Good. Yes,
Good
hello.
Good evening, Ms. Saldana. I just want to verify that your comment is about one of the agendized items based on what council has stated.
I had submitted this for item 2, which I thought was not agenda, but I see it's new business, so I'll just continue under new business.
Okay, but you are addressing either the under the agenda, the continuance of teleconferencing or the Center for Policing Equity Report on and response by the San Diego Sheriff's.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you for your patience. So thank you for being here tonight. Your 3 minutes would start now.
Okay, thank you. So regarding item 2A, the continuance of teleconference meeting options, I appreciate that you have changed format over to Zoom. I think it is a more recognizable and easier software that people are using more broadly than the previous one that you had. So thank you for that. Regarding the equity report and responses, again, thank you for taking this up. And somewhat related to that, just you may be tracking that the audit that has been requested at the state level is coming out in April. And since you're doing a special meeting on some of these items, I wanted to ask that just as you're doing the equity report in a special format tonight, that you would please consider doing a special meeting when the audit results are made available to devote enough time and for people to respond and to review the documents that will be available, they're estimating in April 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ladanya. And Ms. Husband, can you queue up the next speaker, please?
Board Chair Youngflesh, the next speaker is Darwin Fishman.
Good evening, Mr. Fishman. And the same question for you. Please, if you're commenting, it can only be on item 2A or 2B. And with that being said, your time would start now.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Darwin Fishman, he, him, his. I'm with the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego and North County Equity Justice Coalition. And I'm coming once again to speak to you about racial profiling and the Center for Policing Equity report. There's been many high-profile reports. This is one of a series that's documented racial profiling. And the basic information it shares is already well known and understood, especially for people working these issues. And it's a disproportionate amount of being pulled over for non-traffic stops for African Americans. And it gets into racial profiling and also for us really a type of not just racial profiling, but intimidation. It's scary. And it changes the way that we operate in the world and in our relationship with law enforcement. And what makes it worse is that organizations and oversight, people that have responsibility for accountability, like the district attorney, like CLERB, like CLERB for the city of San Diego, don't do their job. The status quo, this type of racial profiling goes on and everyone washes their hands. We've come to you in terms of RJC and EJC is giving you concrete solutions on ways to resolve these issues. We hope you take these suggestions seriously and find ways to positively change these dynamics. It does mean that the officers need to be trained in a different way. It does mean that also CLERB has to be trained in a different way. Our complaints have to be taken seriously. They need to be sustained, not just vindicating the officers or saying that if you can't figure it out, then it's acceptable that you'll just accept their version. The police, what's already in place in terms of protecting police officers needs to be challenged. The history of officers, how often they pull people over, their numbers for race need to be pursued, even if it means changing state law. Paul Parker's opened up that space for you guys to help advocate for it. I think that's really critical. It's used in other ways in terms of establishing if there's a history and pattern, then there's probably something wrong. And it's probably also not a majority of officers. It probably is a small percentage. And to the extent that you can identify those officers and stop them from doing what they're doing, especially in terms of racial profiling, will improve community police relations. So I thank you for having this on this agenda again. And we're definitely here to work with you on concrete solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. Ms. Husband, is there any other public comment?
Chair Youngflesh, there are 3 more currently.
Okay.
The next one, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The next one is Yusuf Miller.
Mr. Miller, the same thing goes where I would ask that your comments be limited to either agenda item 2A or 2B. And with that, your 3 minutes would start now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Yusuf Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, as well as the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. and I'm speaking to the CPE report that will be discussed this evening. The CPE report is one of many reports that has been coming out over the years, and it reflects the decades of complaints against law enforcement from the community, which generally goes unheard. And the thing that's not surprising to the community is that there is another report that says the same thing we've been saying for decades. The thing that would help and be surprising to us is if anyone did anything about it, anyone had a serious discussion about it, made any changes in policy and procedure about it. And that's one thing that we're encouraged that the CLERB is looking at, but we want to see action and some fruitful discussion on the issue of racial profiling and use of force on people of color. Now, of course, law enforcement always comes back and say, well, the data doesn't really reflect what's going on in the community because we report additional things that other people don't report, other departments don't report. We have a larger area of coverage, all beside the point. The point is that when you report and then the demographics with people of color have a higher use of force, whether you're reporting more types of use of force or not, the use of those forces are used against people of color more often and more frequently, and often in the more deadliest manner. So please look at it in a real time, in a real consequence sort of way. We appreciate you taking up this fight and being innovative when it comes to dealing with these issues. I would like to second Ms. Saldana's request that this audit that has been going on is going to be done soon, and we need the same type of scrutiny over the data that comes out from that. These, like I said, these issues have been going on for a very, very long time. We've been singing the same and crying the same story for the very long time, and we want to make sure that something finally is being done. The report is not important. It's what we do about the report that is. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Husband, can you please introduce the next speaker?
Chair Yamflesh, the next speaker is Francine Maxwell.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. If you're here, your 3 minutes would start now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Francine Maxwell, Black Men and Women United Chairwoman. I'm calling to ask the CLERB to consider making sure that you advertise to make sure that the community that is Wi-Fi deficient, they understand when you have a meeting, when there's a special called meeting, because the community, because we have identified so many people that are Wi-Fi deficient, they don't get to go online and look up the county websites and different things like that. So if you can consider talking and making sure that there's another avenue, we have La Prensa, Voice and Viewpoint, Filipino Press. We need to make sure that the community knows that you are active and you're working hard. Regarding the CPE report, once again, the community is happy to have something in their hand that they can continue to add to the data that we've always known. We have living history. We have people with life experiences that are walking our streets and helping educate the next generation. So we want to make sure that at some point, and we're really close to 2022, let's make sure that we do something. So we know what is happening to our Black men and women. We need you to ask the hard and do a deep dive into the question. Make sure that the data reflects what's going on with the excessive force for our loved ones that are behind bars versus our loved ones that are being stopped on the streets. Remember, our county sheriffs has over 9 contracts throughout this region. And so we want to be intentional. We want to make sure that there's a sense of urgency that we are reporting the excessive use that is behind bars versus the excessive use that is here on our streets. So as the chairwoman for Black Men and Women United, I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. And I thank you so much for doing this and having it on your agenda regarding the CPE. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. And I believe, Ms. Husband, we have one more speaker. Is that correct?
There's an additional one now. So there's 2 more.
Okay.
The next one is Debbie Cortell.
Ms. Cortell, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Ms. Cortell, your 3 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read so that I can try to stay on script and on time. Thank you first for providing this forum to allow community members to voice our concerns. My concern upon reading the CPE report is for the communities who often have very little voice. Groups that make up a smaller percentage of the San Diego population, but often have higher frequency of contact with police departments, who deserve no less respect and full community resources and support just as other community members. Groups such as the unsheltered, those with mental disorders, African Americans, Latinos, Indigenous, Asians, and the LGBTQ communities. We have known for a long period of time that without proof, our experiences are minimalized, trivialized, and we have in many cases been turned away, rejected, or face obstacles in feeling not being heard. Our communities deserve the same freedoms as everyone else. And at times, if we encounter exchanges with the police department, we deserve the same professional treatment that echoes police department policy and procedures. Examples: courteous and compassionate service, quality service to the communities, without regard to whether we live in a house or a cardboard box, no matter our skin color, race, gender identification, or mental stability. How can it be accidental for certain groups of communities to be treated so consistently different than others? How can certain work units be justified in their selective use of force? Regular, ongoing, well-rounded, thorough reflection, evaluation should be a normal practice within the department. We live in a world now where we can't even go through to a fast food drive-through without getting asked to complete a feedback survey before we leave. Everywhere, companies are measuring and evaluating themselves from every nook and corner because they understand that those metrics matter. The police department should be no different. Even more so, the departments are given such a high level of responsibility, including at times our lives in their hands. You have data, and we would like you to use it to do what is right. Be more intentional and proactive with reform efforts. Provide more transparency to the public consistently. Look into the methods and procedures into which you use to determine if policies and procedures are being followed to mitigate risk of opportunities that create damage to vulnerable populations and unequitable treatment to different communities. They may need to be updated. I implore you all to do more with the gift of information given to you. I remind you of these words paraphrased from the oath of honor. On my honor, I will never betray my badge by integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable to our actions. I will uphold the Constitution and will remain loyal to my community and the agency I serve. For those who are doing just that, I appreciate and thank you. But for those who have lost their way, I would like accountability. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Ms. Husband, I believe there's one more.
Yes, Board Chair Youngflush. The next one is Danielle Richardson.
Ms. Richardson, if you are present, your 3 minutes would start now. Please remember also to keep the comments limited to what is on the agenda. Thank you.
Hi, yes, my name is Danielle Richardson. I've been involved in racial justice in the realm of law enforcement for many years, and I would like to say I agree with the other speakers who have been speaking previously, and I would like to say I've been through so many discussions with so many different panels of leaders where we do the investigation, we find out, oh, maybe this is the problem, we find out this is the problem, we find more reports, and then something tends to happen where the part where we make change, implement policy, doesn't happen. So thank you for starting this process of looking into our options, and I just really, from the bottom of my heart, ask you to please make some change. There are a few officers out there who are rogue, reckless, and violent, and unfortunately racist. And I try to do everything I can to help to hold those officers accountable, but I'm not able to. And I need your help to do that. And I just think if we cannot implement some sort of action that will change them and hold them accountable, we are all guilty of enabling this continued police terror in San Diego. And it is terror, I'll tell you that. And I think we all need to do our part to stop it. And I have faith in you. You can do it. When the police start to get defensive, it is what it is. They always do that. If you enable them in their state of defensiveness, then the problem will continue. So someone has got to stand up, someone in power, and I'm hoping it's you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Husband, do we have any more speakers?
Board Chair Youngflesh, there are not any additional speakers at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on to agenda item 2B. And Mr. Parker, if you're present, would you like to address the board regarding this agenda item?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. 2B is going to be a discussion about the Center for Policing Equity report on and a response by the San Diego Sheriff's Department and a request from the Sheriff's Department for a report back on how it plans to address the identified concerns. As everyone on the call knows and all of the board members know, the Sheriff's Department released the Center for Policing Equity report about a week and a half ago. We felt that it was an important report. Obviously, it dovetailed exactly with what we had been looking at over the previous couple of months about how best to investigate allegations of racial discrimination as it pertained to our complainants. And so this is a report that the Sheriff's Department had asked for itself 2 years ago, and now the results are in. We felt that it was important enough to put on the agenda to hear the public, but also to have the board discuss it. And again, if they feel the need to ask for some kind of report back about the results of this report and what the Sheriff's Department plans to do about the report. I know that there is a response that the Sheriff's Department made to the report that was sent out along with the materials, and it's also on our website. But really, again, this was an opportunity for us to engage the public, but also to have the board members weigh in on this very, very important topic. And then for you folks, the CLERB members, to decide what, if anything, needs to occur from this point forward. So with that, Chair Youngflesh, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, and I'd like to open the floor up for discussion. Do any board members have any comments on this? Okay, and I'm scrolling through, so please forgive me if I'm missing you, but I don't see that anyone's hand is raised. So, Mr. Parker, if there is not a specific comment that board members want to make, then are we looking for a motion to respond to the Sheriff's Department, or what would be the suggestion of council or yourself?
And I will work with council on that. And if I speak out of line here, I'm sure that Ms. Hoffman will correct me. But part of the item is to perhaps request a report back if CLERB is interested in getting the department's opinion above and beyond what they've already provided to this report, to ask maybe for a report back about what the department can or is willing to do, or what their analysis is of this data or whatever. I mean, it is an extremely important topic. So I would, if a board member wants to put that out there, then I think that would be up to the board, and we'll go from there.
Right. So, Ms. Pintar, I at least saw that you unmuted yourself. I didn't know if you had a comment you'd like to make.
I was going to be ready to comment, but I'm happy to yield the floor to anyone else who might have something to say or would like to make the motion.
I think the floor is all yours from what I see.
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion to ask the Sheriff's Department to return to the CLERB with a report back about how they're going to address the findings in this equity report. I would also, I would encourage the Sheriff's Department to look at the Justice Navigator, which is a project. As I read through the report, there was a link to Justice Navigator, which is a project of the Center for Policing Equity. The Policing Equity report itself did not provide recommendations as to how to address the disparities that they discovered. But I noticed in the Justice Navigator link, that again is a project of CPE, it did provide some suggestions as to how some of these problems could be addressed. I'm just, for example, it said that sheriffs should be required, officers should be required to provide a brief written description of every stop. So trends can be identified. Why was this person stopped? Perhaps there could be trends about certain officers who are making these stops more frequently. I only point to that as an example. So I would make a motion that the Sheriff's Department will report back to us in 60 days. I say 60 because in 30 days, we are going at the next meeting in January, we will be hearing, I think, lengthy report about the COVID data that I requested at our previous December meeting. So unless anyone has an objection to that, I'd ask them to come back to us at our February meeting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would think I'm able to second that motion. So I'd go ahead and second it. And then I would ask Ms. Husband to call roll. Unless there's further discussion, but I don't see anyone's is raising their hand virtually or physically. Oh, GI, Mr. Wilson?
Are there some specific questions that Paul has in mind? I think if we go to with a letter back to Sheriff, I'd like to have a couple of bullets there or specific areas that may be of concern to the investigators or to Paul. I'd just like to give them a little more something to work with than just respond, because there's a very good chance they could go all over the map on this thing.
I understand. Paul, did you have something, Mr. Parker, did you have something in mind to address Mr. Wilson's comments?
I didn't have anything specific. I think that what I could do in the letter to the Sheriff's Department is address some of the concerns that were raised, obviously about the ratios of certain groups being pulled over 3.5 times more than white persons, things like that. I can list it out, but I'm also going to look at what the responses that they've already given, because there are responses there, and try to word it in such a way. I don't want them to give, why have them address the same thing twice? Let's see what is there that can be addressed, that we can put out, and try to get a response back that's not simply the response that to the overall report that they've provided. So I don't have anything right here. I was hoping that the board would kind of, if they had any, and board members had anything specific that they would like to see, that's where we were going to go. But at minimum, that's why I put this on the agenda, so that we could move forward and try to figure out what we can do about this as we move forward for the community and those who are incarcerated.
Yeah, and perhaps Mr. Parker could poll our investigators as well. And maybe there's something that jumps out to them as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Pintar?
I believe Mr. Ware had his hand up before I did, so I'd be happy to let him go first.
I apologize, and I thank you for your honesty. I did not see him. Mr. Ware?
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, good evening. Yes, I would definitely like to have some information on not only how they're going to address the issues in the report, but also, more importantly for me, what type of education are the officers or the deputies going to get going forward? I would like to see their plan, their drawn out plan on, from an education standpoint, as we go forward to this area, because what's happened in the past is going to repeat itself if we don't intentionally address it. So I would like to see it and hear their plan for that education piece.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Pintar?
I just, two things. I don't know if it's possible for Paul to poll the individual board members separate from the meeting to see if there are specific questions that CLERB members would like included in the question in the letter that is sent. But I would also like to make sure that the letter, Paul, emphasizes that we're looking for actionable, that we aren't looking for an additional response to the report itself, but rather the action items that they intend to take to address the disparities. Does that make sense? I feel like the response that we got was them, stating why the data may be this or that versus how they intended to address the problems.
Well, I think it makes sense to me, but I would ask Mr. Parker, as he's the one who's drafting the letter, if that makes sense to him.
It makes perfect sense to me. I will get something drafted after this week, and I will get it to the department before New Year's Day.
Ms. Domingos?
Yeah, hi. I remember 2 meetings ago, we had this, it was up for discussion. The community had spoken strongly about this, and there were a few concrete suggestions. While folks were speaking, I was writing them down. We had, I had suggested things like, there was the Campaign Zero report that we all read, or that was sent out for us to read. And it actually had, like, you know, the data, concrete solutions, but most of all, we had suggestions like the monitoring monthly records of officers and checking to see for racial profiling. And there have been concrete studies, especially for San Diego and communities of color. So I was just wondering what happened with those suggestions that I had brought up in 2 previous meetings. Because now it sounds like there wasn't anything said in that regards.
Ms. Domingos, again, I understand your concerns. However, the item has to be agendized for us to talk about it tonight. So if you're talking about trying to bring something up within the response that Mr. Parker's drafting for the Center for Policing Equity Report, then that would be appropriate. But I'm not sure if that's, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're trying to get at. But what I'm hearing is that you would like to address something separate from the response, because my understanding of the response is he's asking for follow-up from the sheriff's office, not necessarily giving them a direction of how they should fix what we believe should be fixed. Is that correct, Mr. Parker?
Yes, that is correct.
And so, Ms. Domingos, is your query separate and apart from the action item that's on the table right now?
I don't believe it is. I believe it's connected with the agenda item number 2.
And how would you envision that? Because as it stands right now, my understanding is Mr. Parker is coming back to, again, just ask for follow-up on certain items that are within the Center for Police Equity Report. And what you're saying is, my understanding, is different comments from the community that aren't necessarily within the report for follow-up. And if I'm wrong, point that out, please. But I'm not seeing the connection there.
I'm mainly talking about the racial profiling.
Right, and so where do you see this in the report? How would you envision that be addressed within this letter specifically as far as follow-up?
I believe that this was brought up, this item, if I'm totally confused, just correct me, but I believe this item was brought up a few months ago. It was taken off and put back on. So if I'm totally confused, please correct me.
Well, the only thing that we have to talk about tonight, because we're limited to what's on the agenda, is the response for the Center for Policing Equity Report, or the report and the response. And so this was not agendized specifically 2 months ago, I believe. And that's why it's on the agenda tonight.
Chair Youngflesh, may I jump in?
Yes, please.
Ms. Domingos and Chair Youngflesh, just to clarify, 2 months ago, actually 2 months ago and 3 months ago, on the agenda was to receive public input for how best to investigate complaints of racial discrimination allegations. That's what we put on the agenda, and we brought it back the next month to get further input from the public. We did receive suggestions from the public. This specific item was placed on this special meeting agenda because it was only released about, 7 to 10 days ago. And we put it on here for a timely discussion for the public and for the board. But this in and of itself was not the item that was on the agenda specifically a couple of months ago. There was an article in one of the articles that was sent out around that time that talked about how the Sheriff's Department had asked for this report, but at the time the results hadn't been back yet. But now that they're back, that's why this item is on the agenda. It is could be tangentially linked to but it's certainly not the same specific item, and it's brand new. So hopefully that clarifies things.
No, it
May
does.
May I?
Sure, go ahead.
So what I'm really struggling with is agenda item number 2. How do you separate agenda item number 2 from racial profiling? They are one and the same thing, are they not?
Racial profiling, absolutely. This part of this report talks about a possibility, obviously, as made very clear in the report, that there is racial component to the policing of the sheriff's department. Yes, that's true. However, the item that was on 2 and 3 months ago was for us to learn how best to investigate complaints of racial discrimination and how best to find the evidence, if it does exist, in our specific cases. In this case, this specific item, again, is what I would envision is that we are going to ask the department specifically how equity, which includes apparent racial profile. That's what it would tend to indicate, that that's what's happening here. So I hope that answers it, Ms. Domingos.
Yes, it does, but I'm just wondering how, because if I'm just wondering how it is possible to separate the two when it's one and the same thing. I know what came out seven or a few days ago is taken as a brand new emergency agenda item, but reading and going through what came out a few days ago and what we had discussed 3 months ago and what was taken off the agenda, the lingo or the language might sound differently, but when it boils down to racial profiling, and I need somebody to really help me out if I'm completely off or completely confused.
No, and
That's my point.
I think I think I understand what you're saying, Ms. Domingos. And I think that the nuance is that the response that I believe Mr. Parker and what the board has requested as far as being drafted is more of the inquiry as to how it will be addressed, as opposed to a discussion or mandating or telling them how to address it. So I think that is, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding it, Mr. Parker, but I think that's the nuance. And so I understand that that's like something that we discussed before, but in that this is a different agenda item and it's being approached a little bit differently. So that in itself.
Yeah, look, the way I look at it, and again, I may have, hopefully I don't lose connection here as I'm driving. However, this is an addition to, this is to be more comprehensive. The way I look at it, the conversation we started 3 months ago, it was a certain aspect of apparent or alleged racial profiling. It was for us to learn how do we move forward and investigate those allegations. That was one component, and it was great information that we received from the public. These are things that we will be looking at as CLERB investigates these type of allegations. That was one component. Now, in addition, you have this think tank, for lack of a better term, that is weighed in, that has made very clear in its opinion that there are disparate treatments. And so at this point, based upon that report, it kind of picks it up and puts the onus on the sheriff's department to respond back to us about, and to the public, more importantly, about how they plan on addressing what this group, this independent group, has said about what it believes, based on its data analysis, to be the practices. So again, for us, 2 to 3 months ago, it was for how we get better, to give the public the forum to discuss it, which also was heard by the sheriff's department, by the way, because they were at the meetings and so they've heard that. And now this is another standalone item. Yes, both dealing with race, but this is for us to get the department, if they're willing, to write back to us and to talk to the public about what it plans to do to address the concerns raised by the Center for Policing Equity. So again, that's the best I can do. I hope it's clear, but I find this to be even more comprehensive. This, plus what we did a couple months ago, really brings it full circle for us about the racial component that we're looking at and that we brought up a couple of months ago. And now the department's own study indicates that there may be some issues. So let's figure out what they're say that they can do about it.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for clarifying that. I think that was well said to distinguish what we're talking about. And Mr. Ware, I see that your hand is up, but do you have further comment or?
Yes, one question in regards to the comments that were just made. We spent a lot of time in this area. We have the report that just came out. Can't we just focus in on what we would like to have happen as a result of that report? So we can move on and address this issue, because the time we just spent could have been spent on being more concrete on addressing this issue. We want the law enforcement partners out there to be transparent. We as board members need to be transparent on the questions that we would like to see them answer. Let's do that and let's focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. And then there's two more hands up. I'm not sure which one was first, Mr. Wilson or Ms. Pintar.
Ladies first.
I just was going to offer that part of my motion was that Mr. Parker poll the CLERB board members to see if there were specific questions they wanted the Sheriff's Department to answer. And perhaps the suggestions from the public that Ms. Domingos said that she wrote down would be some of those. Maybe those are specific things that she would like Paul to include in his letter to have the Sheriff's Department respond to. If there were recommendations that were brought up by the public that she thinks are relevant, then we should have them included in the letter and ask the Sheriff's Department to respond to them. I was just going to offer that as a potential solution to the discussion that we were having.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pintar. And Mr. Wilson.
I concur with Mr. Ware, and time permitting, would have to talk with Mr. Parker, perhaps form ad hoc committee so we could give him some more detailed input, just for consideration. But I'm not sure if we have enough time to do that. But I concur with Mr. Ware.
Okay, and Ms. Domingos, do you have another comment?
Yes, so Mr. Ware, Ms. Pintar, and Mr. Wilson just brought up the same thing I said before, the same points and the suggestions that were concrete. So Mr. Parker had said like 3 months ago, if I remember correctly, community was asked for input, and they gave, like, several organizations called in and gave input. And then I had actually asked I was asking how that would, because the CRB at the time had something of the same, and I think we have a member here who was on the CRB that also tried, I think it was, I forget her name. Vaughn. Exactly. And she was also trying to explain what they had done and how they had done their trainings. And that's actually what I was talking about. They're actually concrete solutions that were given. And if we go back to the minutes, it should reflect in the minutes. So that's what I don't understand. Every time this topic comes up, it's always like we need concrete solutions. And I believe that actually suggestions were sent to the sheriffs and we were waiting for a response, but I never heard back, and then it was pulled, and then now we have this item. So I'm willing to work with Mr. Parker, and I believe if we pull those minutes, it will be reflected on concrete solutions that were offered by the community at that meeting.
So what I'm hearing from the board members, Mr. Parker and Mr. Wilson, I see your hand is still raised. Do you have a further comment, or did you just, okay. And so my suggestion, and I'm not sure, we already have a motion on the table, is I believe the motion is just for us to draft a response, but that I'm hearing the board members say they want to integrate some suggestions into how to address some of the issues, such as what Mr. Ware said, and Ms. Pintar, Ms. Domingos, along with questioning for further data or further response of how the Sheriff's Office will respond to it. So would it be possible that we work together, Mr. Parker, to come up with a letter addressing both of those issues? Mr. Parker, are you still there?
Yes, yeah, I'm here, and I can definitely do whatever the board would like me to do. whatever the board would like me to do, I will do. I will make sure the letter is comprehensive. I do like the idea of getting the specifics that the board is going to want me to do, because I certainly don't want to overlook anything. I'm very aware of the suggestions made by the public that, again, we were going to be doing as part of our investigations, that the Sheriff's Department was aware of as well, but we could put those into writing, codify that, in addition to asking for the report back on the specific concerns raised by the Center for Policing Equity. I'm certainly willing to do that.
Okay, so with the motion on the table, and my suggestion would be that I could work with Mr. Parker to sort of go through the letter and the language to send over to the sheriff's office, if you're comfortable with that, Mr. Parker. And then we can go ahead and vote on the motion unless there's further discussion.
I have my hand raised.
Okay, you can go ahead, Ms. Domingos, thank you.
Yeah, I like Mr. Wilson's suggestion about the ad hoc committee. I feel as a board, we should be much more involved in this process.
My concern with the ad hoc committee is historically it takes a lot of time and participation, which is great, but we want to, in my opinion, kind of strike while the iron's hot and sort of get back to the sheriff's department and get further information or make suggestions as needed. An ad hoc committee will take time in order to form, meet, and then come up with further recommendations. And so, but I'm happy if the board wants to discuss that further. I would say that we should go ahead. There is a motion pending and a first and a second on that, I believe. And we would need to vote on that. Mr. Wilson, are you?
I want to call the question. I call the question.
Okay, I call the question. And we do have a motion pending, if I'm correct, at the beginning of this. Ms. Hoffman?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, do you recall if we have a motion pending at this time? I believe we do.
There is a motion. I don't recall if there was a second.
Yes, it was seconded by Susan.
Okay, and then call the question. So I'd ask Ms. Husband to call roll.
Board Chair Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney, Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keene Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. We have nothing else agendized for tonight, so I believe that's it for today's meeting, and there's no closed session. So with that, I would adjourn the meeting at 6:21, and I would wish everyone a happy holidays.
May I ask a question?
Well, there's nothing outstanding at this time, so we can't really further the discussion.
If it relates to the item we just discussed, we can continue.
It relates to the item. I just feel I did not get an answer to the question of the ad hoc committee. Was that voted down or was that dismissed or?
There was no motion made for an ad hoc committee. There has to be a motion that's made and a second and then a vote.
Yeah, but that wasn't called for. So when I asked for the ad hoc, your comments, Madam Chair, was it would take a lot of time and effort. I was expecting further discussion, and then the next thing I know is there was a motion we needed to vote on. So I felt that that was
Right.
either missed or cut short or.
Under the rules for open meeting and the Robert's Rules of Order, if there's a call of the question, which means if there's a call of the question, then we have to move forward and actually vote on it. And so if you are moving for an ad hoc committee separate for agenda item number 2, then there would have to be a motion made and a second, and then we'd vote on that separately. Correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, please.
Yeah, that's correct. Ms. Domingos, you can make a motion if you have one, now that we've taken care of the motion that was on the floor earlier.
Exactly. You have to clear off what motion is there already. And because of the call of question, that's why we went ahead and voted. And then procedurally, there'd have to be a separate motion.
So council, have I been cleared to make a motion to to.
But you can always make a motion. You don't need me to clear you. You can make a motion.
No, I
So
was asking Ms. Hoffman, please, Madam Chair, because I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right
Yes,
track.
there's no motion on the table now, so any member could make a motion related to something on the agenda.
And I apologize, Mr. Domingos. I'm counsel as well, so I'm used to responding to that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I have it, I'm doing it properly, so. Yeah. Okay, I would like to make a motion that we have an ad hoc committee to work with Executive Director Paul Parker on the issue of agenda item number 2.
And you're specifically referring to agenda item number 2B, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I would open the floor to any discussion specifically on the ad hoc committee. So I would suggest that that seems like pretty broad language. And so I would ask Ms. Domingos specifically, what are you envisioning with this? Because we've already voted to have a response and letter given.
I have said this multiple times. I believe the letter is a great idea, but the ad hoc committee would also bring a lot to the table, especially when it comes to specifics.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand is for an ad hoc committee to be there, there's usually a point to it as far as, what your objective is. What would be the specific objective of this ad hoc committee?
Specifics for training with law enforcement, as well as board members in regards to racial profiling, because right now we're writing a letter that is beautiful, but that letter doesn't necessarily carry any type of training or action. It's just a bare recommendation.
I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Ms. Pintor.
I just wanted to offer a suggestion. 2 things. You had mentioned that you thought it might, what I heard you say, at least if I interpreted this correctly, is that you thought an ad hoc committee might slow down the response that we get from the sheriff's department report back. Their report back to us on how they intend to address the disparities and inequities that were raised in the study. I think I would just like to recommend or suggest that the ad hoc committee perhaps look at potential solutions, actionable items, things that need to be changed. I think that's what I believe that's what Ms. Domingos is hoping to achieve with the ad hoc committee. And then when we get the report back from the sheriff's department, maybe we can compare the two. And maybe there's some time, the ad hoc committee needs a little more time than the 60 days that we've offered the sheriff's department to report back to us. But I personally don't just want to know what the sheriff's department suggests they're going to do about it. I would like to hear what some other experts, for example, the Center for Policing and Equity offered in the chat to have a separate conversation with us about that. So, it might be that there are additional suggestions for fixing these problems that come from outside the sheriff's department. And perhaps that's what the focus of the ad hoc committee could be.
Okay. Yeah, and my comment regarding the slow process is if it was in lieu of some sort of letter, because I've seen these ad hoc committees before where we have obviously the best of intentions and they just it seems like the process slows down even more so because of
Right.
trying to accumulate
That is why I wanted to offer and clarify that they happen at the same time, that an ad hoc committee could be formed and that we could compare the recommendations of the ad hoc committee to the report that we received back from the sheriff's department.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pinter. And Ms. Domingos, did you have another comment?
I definitely do. Maybe it's the way I'm expressing myself, but Ms. Pintar just literally said what I was suggesting, that we should do both. So maybe it's my language or use of verbiage I don't understand, but I think that we should do both, the letter and the ad hoc committee. And I hear you definitely when you say the ad hoc might slow down the process, but this has been a long-standing issue that needs a lot of work. And I think it is worth the time that we invest this as a board to get this issue resolved.
Well, is there any further discussion on this motion? And please speak up. I don't see anybody, but I am scrolling through looking for people. Okay, well then we have a motion on the table. Mr. Wilson, is your hand raised as a second or to speak, or did you forget to pull it down?
No, I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
I like the idea of this, of doing this simultaneously so that I know that ad hoc committees can be slow and cumbersome, but I really think that's important, that there must be a way we can engineer this so we can do it simultaneously. Because I know there's some things I would like to in detail review, particularly with Mr. Ware, in terms of education and training of law enforcement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And Mr. Ware?
Yes, I concur with Mr. Wilson. Also agree with Ms. Domingos. Is let's slow it down if we have to and do it right and get it right. There's, this has been a long time coming, this whole process to where we find ourselves in with the equity pieces and all the things that's happening with law enforcement. Our law enforcement partners, they are our partners. And when you are a partner, you owe your partner accountability, and your partner owes you the same accountability as well as the transparency. So I'm all for doing it the same time as Mr. Wilson and Ms. Domingos mentioned, and let's get it right, because we don't want to go back down this road again.
So is there any further discussion? Seeing none, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so seconded by Ms. Kank, and then I would ask Ms. Husband to call roll.
Board Chair Susan Youngquist,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney, Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Husband. Ms. Hoffman, as far as the ad hoc committee members, is it sufficient to ask the board members to contact Mr. Parker and then we will form the ad hoc committee, or do we have to do this right now?
It'd be best to do it now in case there's more than a quorum interested.
Okay. With that being said, I would ask for any members that are here tonight if they have interest in being on the ad hoc committee.
I have interest in being on the ad hoc committee.
So Ms. Kang, Mr.
I'm
Ware,
also-
and Mr. Ghost. Okay. And Mr. Wilson? Okay. And the same thing goes, Ms. Hoffman, do I need to appoint a chair for the ad hoc committee at this time? No. Okay, then we have Mr. Wilson, Ms. Domingos, Mr. Ware, and Ms. Kank willing to serve on the ad hoc committee. And then I would ask that the meetings then be coordinated via Mr. Parker, if that is okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further discussion on 2B? Because we now have two motions that have passed, and I believe there's been a pretty robust discussion, but if there's anything further, if not, then I will adjourn the meeting. Okay. Seeing and hearing nothing else, I thank you all for participating tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Happy holidays. Stay safe. Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Happy holidays.